So we finished looking at how we calculate GDP. So we calculate GDP by production approach, and different entities tell how much they have produced through the various accounts that they have to register with the government. And this is how the government finds out how much was the total production of the economy in that particular year. Now, today, we are going to be looking at the criticisms of this entire concept of GDP. As to, I mean, is this the way a nation should be reflected? I mean, for the longest period of time, and this is like 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whenever you talk about a nation, the most important figure that represents a nation was its GDP. So you look at the GDP and you say, underdeveloped, oh, developed, or whatever. And that's all. That's how a nation was looked at. One number, GDP. Very, very, very prevalent, very strong concept, a strong label which is put on you and you can't shrug it off. But over a period of time, people started saying that maybe this is not a very good idea. And is a nation actually supposed to be represented like this? So the criticisms about this entire concept of looking at GDP, representing a nation through GDP, all of these things started coming. And you should know about this because you have to understand that although economic concepts are very important, they are not the only concepts that rule our world. So the first criticism of GDP, the very first criticism, that criticism is that GDP does not count anything which is not traded. So a nation gets made of its people, and people are made by their families, by their mothers especially. Mothers cook, mothers teach the children the values. Mothers tell them how to walk, how to talk, how to wear shoes, how to do every single thing. Your personality, 50% of your personality, if not more, is defined by how your mother has taught you to do what. But her contribution is never calculated in GDP. So mothers are worthless. What nonsense. They are not worthless. They are one of the most important beings in this world. And yet, their contribution is not even considered when you calculate GDP. And additionally, you say that these are the people who are non-workers, who don't contribute anything to the economy, and hence maybe quote unquote useless. It is such a terrible, terrible thing to happen that when you look at GDP, you do not consider the people who make this society the way it is. And mothers are one, saints are another. Saints do not earn income. They do not get into an occupation. They are into meditation, are Rishimonis, and they teach and they do not take any money for those teaching also, and their contribution are also never ever calculated in GDP, but the entire values for the society gets made by these people, but their contribution is not counted as far as GDP is concerned. So this is a very, very serious freedom fighters. Freedom fighters fight for the nation and they die for the nation, but they are not the people who are into earning, because if they earn then they will not be able to do these revolts. So their contribution is also not counted. So GDP counts the contribution only of the materialistic things, and materialistic things don't always make the entire society. The society is made by so much more, and GDP does not even look at it. So this is the first criticism, that contribution of the people who build the society is not counted in GDP. And hence GDP is a very incomplete concept to represent a nation, to talk about a nation. The second criticism of GDP is not something which is regarding the concept or its meaning. It is regarding its calculation. So um, now you all, if you were sitting in a class, unfortunately you are not sitting in the class, you are sitting in front of the computer and watching this class, unfortunately. But if GDP, if the class average of a class is counted by looking at just 20% of the students of the class who are incidentally the highest uh, grade owners. So they are the ones who are the highest graders, and you just look at their marks and then you say that the average grade of this class is say 8.5 out of 10. uh, wouldn't you all others who are actually more than 60 or 65% of the class feel that this is very, very unfair? And this is not you. The average of the class is not 8.5. It's not. So similar thing is true as far as GDP is concerned. For a nation like us, you must have seen that you have shops, you have companies, but there are many, many more people whom you find on footpath. Somebody is selling sharbat, somebody is repairing bicycles, somebody is just simply begging, somebody is doing the work of cutting the hair or even cleaning the ears of some other people. There is some persons who are giving you the ये क्या कहते हैं उसको, गन्ने का रस एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट. कितने अलग अलग, कोई वड़ा बेच रहा है, कोई खाना बेच रहा है, तो कोई पेन बेच रहा है, तो कोई छोटे छोटे से पर्स बेच रहा है. देयर आर सो मैनी पीपल डूइंग सो मैनी डिफरेंट थिंग्स एंड we have no clue how much they earn. No clue. So what we do is we take all of these people who run into crores incidentally, and they say that almost uh, 80 to 85% of India's population is either into agriculture or it is into this informal sector, and we just don't know how much they earn, especially the informal sector people. Informal sector is this sector that I just talked about, that, you know, I mean, people who are doing all these odd jobs all over. We do not know anything about their earning. So the earnings that we look at is the returns that are filed by the industries, the returns that are filed by the commercial establishments, which are actually registered with the government, and everybody else's income is assumed. Some figure is assumed. And then you say that this is the total GDP. India's GDP is counted by looking at hardly 15 to 20% of India's population. And the remaining 85% population and its contribution is something that we have no idea about. And this is where GDP calculation fails miserably for India. So when we were growing very fast in 1990s, we did not even know that the level of malnourishment is actually increasing amongst the children. So there is a huge class of people who are actually becoming poorer. We had no clue because our GDP does not give us that estimate at all. So whenever you look at this GDP is going up and feel very happy about it or very excited about it, know that you are looking at just 15% of the picture. And the 85% of the picture is complete darkness. We don't know whether it is increasing, decreasing, remaining constant. We don't know at all. Okay, please know this. And as far as agriculture is concerned, yes, for agriculture, we have something like crop cutting estimates. So for every region, we find out how much crops could have been grown, but the actual estimate or the actual counting of agricultural production is also something which is almost impossible. So that is also an estimate, but it is far more informed and systematic estimate compared to the estimate of the informal sector. So that's why GDP is not reliable at all as far as nations like India are concerned, where you have informal sector which is of very huge size. Okay, so this is the second criticism of GDP. Now let's look at the third criticism. And the interestingly, all of these criticisms have come from different classes of people. So people who think about values and ethics come with the first criticism, that you are not counting the contribution of the people who are actually important for us. The calculation of GDP and its mistakes are pointed out by development economists, who say that you are not counting informal sector, and hence your GDP figures are very, very misleading. The third criticism of GDP comes from the environmentalists. And the environmentalists are saying that when you are producing anything, say for example, you have made a road. You are making a road, but while making a road, you destroyed so many trees. So are we keeping account of that? No. When you have clothes being made and those clothes are dyed, so there is a color put on them, and then there are so many water bodies in India which have the color of purple, the color of pink. The water is not blue, it's pink, it's purple, it's yellow, it's so many different colors. And why is that? Because the discharge is just put into the water and those water bodies die. Do we calculate the damage that we have done there? No, we don't. So then, I mean, aren't we just saying that I'm destroying my resources, I'm destroying my capacity to produce further, and I'm not taking into account when I'm saying that this is how much I've produced? I have produced, but I've destroyed also. So then, shouldn't I be considering production minus destruction and then say that this is actually the total production of the country? No, we don't do that. So the green GDP is something which is not counted. And so there were people who tried out the green GDP. There was a problem with that, unfortunately, that people tried to bring in the environmental damage into account when you are calculating GDP. But the exercise was very difficult, because when you say that the air has been very badly polluted by so much of vehicles being on road and by vehicular production, but what is the value of air? You don't know. When you say that the water bodies are destroyed, what is the value of pure water? You don't know. When you say that when I'm mining something, I'm destroying the forests which are there on that land, and that forest is gone forever, what is the value of that forest? Is it just the value of the teak or the value of that wood? But what about the oxygen that it generates? What about the rains that it brings in? What about the soil that it pulls together and stops the soil erosion? What about these? How are we going to be valuing these things? So it's very difficult, very difficult. And that is the reason why green GDP is something which is not even counted now. But remember that we are often destroying more than producing. So if we consider the environmental damage, there is a big possibility that the figure of GDP will come out to be negative rather than positive. Remember this. Okay. So that was your third criticism. Now comes the fourth criticism. The fourth criticism says that when you are looking at the total production of goods and services in a country, fine, that is an economic concept. But does that actually reflect the well-being of your people? How happy they are? Does that reflect that? And if it is not reflecting how happy you are, how does it matter how much money you have in your hands? It doesn't matter. So that is the reason why they came out with an alternative index called Human Development Index. So that is an alternative to GDP, where you are trying to at least take into consideration some parameters. So the Human Development Index is basically based on three different parameters. So the first is a per capita income. Per capita income is the GDP divided by the total population. So that per head, how much income is there in your hands? That's what it counts. So per capita income. So if I have a huge population like India, and then even if I have GDP, which is the, I think, fifth highest in the world, unfortunately, our per capita income comes out to be very, very less. So you, as a government, you would keep on saying that we are the fifth largest as far as the GDP is concerned. But the fact is that if you look at the per capita income, we are one of the poorest nations even today. So one is per capita income that Human Development Index considers. The second thing that it considers is the life expectancy. And life expectancy means that if you have children who are dying when they are very small because of malnutrition, if you have mothers who are dying when they are giving birth to their children, maternal mortality is very high. All of these things, and if you do not have good health facilities, then lot of your people would die because of some very small diseases like diarrhea, like influenza. You just die when you could have been saved just with, like taking some 10 tablets and you are all set in life and you will survive. They can't even afford that. So when you consider life expectancy, you are taking into consideration these things, that what is the average age of the citizens of this nation? People die at what age? Incidentally, life expectancy of India has been increasing a lot. So when I was a student, it was in 50s. Now, when I'm a teacher, it is already reaching 70s. So we are far, 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 far better off now, far better. Okay. And third thing that Human Development Index takes into consideration is the education. Because finally, we have seen this. Manual laborers do not earn much. If you want to get a good standard of living, you have to be educated. So how many people of this nation are educated? So you look at the literacy rate, and for Human Development Index, they just look at the literacy rate. Unfortunately, the calculation of literacy rate is left to the country to decide. So the country decides who are literate. So there are nations which say that if you have finished so many years of schooling, you are literate. In India, if you can just sign your name, you are literate. And then we say that we have 73% people who are literate. I don't know what that means. And I don't know how much that actually translates into the practical knowledge of the people of this country. But whatever. So these are the three things that they consider as human development, and the Human Development Index is made based on this. So GDP, we are the fifth largest. Human Development Index, we are 142nd in the total of 150. So we are the most bottom. We are at the most bottom of Human Development Index. It's a shameful thing, and we need to understand this. So Human Development Index talks of all of those things. We can go into more details of Human Development Index, but I don't have time. The only thing that I can tell you is that Human Development Report does not just talk about these three indicators. It looks at gender development, it looks at social development, it looks at the criminal record of the nation, it looks at so many different indicators, and then it decides how developed the human beings are in this particular nation. It's a very, very beautiful thing to be added to the development literature. And this happened in 1990s when the Human Development Report came out for the first time. So this was a fourth criticism of GDP. Now the fifth criticism, that GDP, of course, looks at only the legal transactions. So if you have made money through smuggling, GDP is not going to look at it, right? First of all, you are not going to report it to the government. So the government will never come to know. And then you basically cannot count it because it's not the kind of money that you want to count. The drugs are sold illegally and a lot of money is made out of that. That is not considered as part of your national income. It's not. Fine. I mean, understandably so. But what happens because of that is something which is very sad. That we have a parallel economy, which is called the black economy in India. And we keep on saying that there is a lot of black money in this nation. If we believe Baba Ramdev, then Baba Ramdev says that almost half of India's national income is actually in black money if not more. So imagine we are counting GDP in the legal tender money, and we are turning out to be the fifth largest economy in the world. If you calculate half of that added to that, saying that 50% of this is black economy, which we have not even considered, we would become the third largest for all you know, replacing Japan. So, I mean, it's impossible to understand where we stand as far as this black economy is concerned. But it is impossible to know also, because nobody is going to tell us the figure, and everybody keeps guessing, everybody keeps saying that it is this much, this much, this much. None of us know exactly how much, but definitely that money is there in our economy, that money is circulating in our economy. We are benefiting from that money because they spend that money on marriages, and they spend those money on ornaments and on palatial bungalows and things like that. So of course that money is circulating in our economy, but we would never get to know. Okay, so that is the fifth criticism. And I'll give you the last criticism. There are many more, but the most important ones are these. And the last criticism is that when you calculate the GDP, you are not considering the security. So Iran might be making a lot of oil. Their GDP is far higher than ours. And not GDP, but per capita incomes are far higher than ours. But would I want to go and settle there? When you ask an Indian where do they want to go and settle, they might say New Zealand or Australia or United States or Western Europe. Nobody would say that they want to go and settle in Afghanistan, or I mean, sorry, Afghanistan is a very poor nation, but in Iran or in Iraq or a nation like that, right? So if you do not consider security, and if you put a number on a nation, then that nation might look like a very great nation, but it actually is not, and people would not want to stay over there. So these are the things that you must understand when you say that GDP is so much for a nation, because GDP does not reflect the character of that nation. GDP does not reflect much about that nation. It just is a number which does not say much. And we should always remember this, because every time somebody says that, oh, that nation has got so much of income, we get carried away. But don't forget that there are so many other different things which are not calculated when you are saying things like this. Or when you say that a nation is very poor, but it might be having, like Bhutan, it might be having a very strong strand of social systems, and which would make its people happy. So Bhutan might be very low as far as the economic development index is concerned, but on happiness index, Bhutan is supposed to be one of the highest. So this is what you should always remember when you talk about GDP. GDP does not reflect a nation. It doesn't. Okay. So with this, I end today's lecture. Bye and have a nice day.